Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofrumento, and one of my favorite concepts in both life and business is that one thing leads to another. And today's guest, today's entrepreneur, is such a living example of one thing leading to another. Whether we're talking about his forays into the world of acting and improv comedy, as well as his entire career, it just seems like one thing has led to another, and it's all resulted in an incredible business that I think most of us, when we hear about what Kyle's up to, we're going to say, yeah, why is that not invented sooner? Why are we not all using that? So let me tell you about today's entrepreneur. His name is Kyle Hudson. Kyle is the founder and CEO of Stacklist. Now, Stacklist is a social bookmarking site that helps anyone easily save and organize and then recall and share all of their favorite things that we've all seen online. And we thought, what did I do with that link? What did I do with that social media post? What did I do with that restaurant? Kyle has spent more than 2 decades helping teams such as Google, Spotify, Marriott, and more research, design, and launch products and services into the world. Now he's decided to take that expertise and build a product that helps people share and discover their favorite things, places, and experiences easily. So I'm excited about today's episode. I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Kyle Hudson. All right, Kyle, I'm so excited to have you here with us today. First things first, welcome to the show.
Thank you. And I love the intro. If you could, if your schedule's free, if you could just come with me and do that at pitches, that would be amazing.
Kyle, if you want me to do that for you, it's only ever going to be in warm weather because here I am wearing a sweatshirt. It's like 80 degrees outside here in Florida. So it tells you everything about my climate preferences. But for real, I'm so pumped about all the things you've done and all the things that you're doing. So you've got to take us beyond the bio. Who's Kyle? How'd you start doing all these awesome things?
Awesome. Well, yeah, I think it's funny. You sort of mentioned one thing leads to another. When I was a kid, I remember people would ask me, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I would be like, I want to be a detective and a sniper and an inventor. Like I just sort of named all of these things that I wanted to be. And there was never like the one thing, like I'm going to be this one thing. It was always, I want to be lots of things. And that's how things have turned out. I've been at large agencies and big companies, but I've also had my own agency a number of times. And then I hit my 45th birthday last year and I was like, you know what? I've been building stuff for other people for a long time and now I want to build stuff for myself. So that sort of led to Stacklist.
Yeah, I love that overview, especially because I thought my combination of wanting to be a meteorologist and a professional soccer player was a weird one, but it sounds like you've talked me there, Kyle. Talk to me about, obviously, having the career that you've had, and you have done such cool work even before Stacklist. I would love for you to navigate, because I kind of have a fuller appreciation than listeners do at this point of the fact that you've done so many different things. Walk us through that one thing leads to another journey, because my caveat is that on podcasts, it always sounds like it makes perfect sense, but I know that in the moment, you could have never predicted what was coming next.
Right. Yeah, no, I think I've always just viewed my career as just being on a river and really sort of listening for whatever the next thing is. If you combine that with neurodivergency and ADHD, it also starts to become like, you're on one thing and you start doing it and you start doing really good at it. And that's interesting. But then like, and what about, blockchain and AI? And like you start, and there's this constant need to want to learn. I don't do well at companies where I'll get to a place and then the idea is you should really just keep doing that thing for a number of years. And then we'll talk about a raise or we'll talk about a level up. I'm always looking for something new. So my first thing was really, I went to University of Alabama for 2 years, Tuscaloosa, really 2 years is always sort of the thing. I wasn't sort of a fan of Tuscaloosa as much. I came back to Georgia. I went to Georgia State, and the first computer level, junior level computer class that I had, they said, today we're going to learn Microsoft Word. And they handed out the syllabus and I stood up and I never went back to school. And I had a friend of mine that was selling web hosting at Interland, which was web.com. And I didn't really know all that much about web hosting, but I did know that he was making good money. And he was about my age. So I was like, get me an interview. So he gets me an interview and I met with the VP of sales who said, great, tell me about your experience with web hosting. I was like, I don't really have any. And I said, well, tell me your experience with technology. And I was, well, I've taken computers apart as a kid and things like that. And he's like, okay, so give me your background on sales. I was like, oh, I've never really formally done sales. And somehow about an hour and a half later, I end up at the head of sales office on the corner of Peachtree Street in Atlanta. And I'm leaning on the window, looking out going, Tom, the thing about sales is... And I guess that's some of the bravado at being 21, and somehow I made it onto the team and ended up doing great. And that sort of led to meeting my co-founder, who we left and started an agency and started selling web design and development for doctors and lawyers who back in 2000 were like, I got to get this thing apparently and that sort of started down the agency path.
Yeah. And it's cool hearing about that because you've seen all different corners of business. And so that's why I'm just going to throw this out there really early on in our conversation today that your beta of Stacklist looks like the finished product for so many different companies. I've used, admittedly, Kyle, you and I didn't talk about this off the air. I've used alternatives similar to what Stacklist does in the past, but none of them really nailed it. Whereas Stacklist looks and feels like the finished product. Talk to us about Stacklist because I obviously don't have the full appreciation of how much work has gone into it and the finished product that I'm seeing today. But talk to us about how that has evolved and really how Stacklist was born.
Yeah, where it was born, it started in my wife and I lived in New York, and in 2017 we were out to dinner, and our conversations are a little different, I think, than most couples dates. We were analyzing the service at the restaurant and sort of how the hostess and then how we were sat and then what could be tweaked to be better. We do the same thing with products, whether it's a cell phone case or whether it's a coffee mug. Like, we're always looking at things and sort of thinking like, what is it that sticks in my brain and makes me want to use this or makes this one of my favorite things? And at that dinner, we were talking about the fact that it's actually not that easy, if you think about it, to just take your favorite things and just kind of like a stack or a deck of cards and just hand it to someone. It doesn't work like that. When you start thinking about it, you're like, well, I've got some stuff in Google Maps, and then probably in Gmail, I've got some links from when I bought something. And then I go into my Amazon purchase, my Amazon history. And then I've got 2 favorite things on Airbnb, or I bookmark things on Instagram. And so that results in having to sort of sit down and type a Google Doc or like an email to someone, or just like text bomb them and be like, here's all those things we talked about. But then your friend that you send that to has the same problem. Where did Kyle send that stuff to me? And do I have it? Do I aggregate it? Do I have the notes about it? And so we set out to start to build something that would make that easy. A Chrome extension. We have all the extensions now, and iPhone and Android, but wherever you are, if you've got a link from someone or you find something on your phone, that you can just take that and send it to Stacklist and then add some notes. This is the place we went to eat with our friends, and we had the pasta primavera, and it was delicious. And so, by doing those things, you give a little bit of context. And then when people ask me, what are your favorite restaurants in New York? If you go to my Stacklist profile, it's on there. Like, you can find it and you can just save everything. And so now I've got those links that I can just text to friends and be like, here you go. And I don't have to do any work.
Yeah, I really appreciate as well the diversity of those use cases that you just portrayed for us, because I think one thing that all of us share as entrepreneurs is we are passionate about so many different things. For me, for example, I love reading soccer news. I love reading political news. I love technology. I mean, you called out the fact that we all see products on Amazon. For me, it's like software tools on AppSumo. I see so many that are so cool, and I just want to share it with all of my entrepreneurial friends. But you're right. It's so hard to recall those things. I'll tell someone, oh my gosh, I saw this, political commentary in the New York Times, and they were talking about this, and there was this chart in it. I can't exactly find that chart again, but you're really solving all of those problems, which leads me to ask you this question, which is part feature based with regards to what you're doing directly with Stacklist, but also just part business strategy of, we always hear that advice about niching down, and your product has so many use cases that I've seen your users seem to be niching themselves down. Like, travel people love using it for travel recommendations. It seems like foodies love saving their restaurant lists. When you think about the concept of niching down with Stacklist, what does that look like, since it applies so universally?
It doesn't. I don't really want to niche down, and I think that's the glitch in the matrix that I've discovered is everyone's niching down, right? You've got all of these specific apps that you can gather all your restaurants for, or a specific app for what you're reading or whatever. But to me, that's just another platform that I have to sign up for. And then if I want to share that, I make you sign up for it and my wife sign up for it. And then we have to share those things in that app. And then if that's, say, books, oh, restaurants, oh yeah, we're on that other app. So then I go to the other app and I save it. And it just sort of fuels the problem of the fact that everything is a niche and everything is a silo and nothing talks across the silo. So, sitting above the clouds is where I want to be, because if we can be the operating system for links in your life, then, we're working on a Mac app or a PC app. And when you click it and you just hit search article or founders I met when I was in New York, and it pulls up all the LinkedIn profiles. I don't have to go to LinkedIn and then search through, which is a use case, by the way. I go to these events, and I was in Tech Week all last week, and I met so many people. Go to LinkedIn and try and get a summary of who you met when you were there and what did you talk about and what do they do, and so instead, what I do is I add people as I meet them to Stacklist, and I add notes. In AI also does angel funding, whatever. And I make a stack for that trip. And now when somebody says oh my gosh, who'd you meet or where'd you go? I have a stack and I just send it to them. And it's not only restaurants, but also like events I went to and all the people I met.
Yeah, I'm grateful that you called that out, Kyle. I just feel like at this period in history and even this period in the future with so many cool technology things coming to the world, it feels like we're seeing a huge shift. You called out not niching down and all the different silos that exist. I'm even thinking about the streaming services. I mean, holy cow, we're all signed up to so many different things that I've seen people on Reddit talking about, like, imagine if we just had one subscription and it had all of these things. And all the commenters were like, yeah, cable. You mean cable. Like that's what it used to look like. Right. I love the fact that you call that out. It feels silly asking you this next question because the way that you're talking about Stacklist, I want to ask you about how strategic and intentional you are and you have been in what it is that you're building. But it almost sounds to me like you're just building what you need and what you want to use, and it's applying across the board. Talk to us about serving yourself versus also thinking about those external use cases that you may not have, but your users do.
I think it is starting from just the culmination of almost 25 years being in product and digital and in and around and leading design and development teams and sort of taking all of that into account. I'm also I'm one of those people that sign up for every single thing that comes across. Like I see something and they're like, oh, you could do this. Here's a new service, and I sign up and I try it, and I'm always like, at least for the first week or so, I want to understand how it works and what it does and what it solves. And so I'm trying to bake that in there. But I am trying to also prove the ubiquity of the need to just solve things across different verticals and not niche down. And I'll give you an example. I have a good friend in New York who's a real estate agent. And I ask him, how do you send prospective places to people that you work with? Well, I go to StreetEasy and I go to Redfin, I go to Zillow, I grab some links and I email them and I say, here's some properties for you. Okay, great. So those links are now in that one email. And so whenever you want to go back to it, you go to the one email or you open them up, sign up for Redfin and Zillow and StreetEasy, and then save them on each of those platforms. Wait, okay, so that doesn't work. And so instead of doing that, being able to save all of those links across all those platforms, but also add the context, just like we do when we text somebody. Hey, this place is great. It's a little smaller than you were wanting, but it's got great light and it sits on the top floor. Like you could add each one of those. And we're working on collaborative stacks where you and I could have a stack, say if we were looking for apartments in Chicago or whatever, that we could have a stack that we're adding things to. And you could be like, this one's terrible. And you could delete it. And then I could add a new one. And we could have comments on those. And we're collaborating. But again, we're doing it above Zillow and Redfin and all of these sort of things, which allows us, to collaborate above that. Plus, I go into my Stacklist account, the same account that I save recipes and Netflix shows or books, and I just type, Upper West Side, and it brings up all of the things that we've been saving and looking for a specific area, instead of having to then remember think one of the ones that I really, really liked was on Zillow. And then I log in there and I look at the hearts. So by not niching down, I don't want to become a real estate app. The problem is not saving real estate links. The problem is being able to save all the things that you're into and recall them really quickly. Another good example is we're actually building out a couple of profiles and working with pro gamers. And so being able to not only showcase some of the best kills in Rainbow Six or some of the best clutch wins, but also what's my streaming setup and what's my gaming PC setup. By doing that, it's one place that you can look at somebody holistically on their profile, not just sort of a set of links like here's my blog, here's my Twitch, here's my, TikTok. It's also all of the things that they're into both personally and professionally makes a much more interesting thing of seeing how someone curates their life.
Yeah, I'm so glad you used that word curate, because I'm going to call you out for being a little counterintuitive in your approach in today's day and age, not only for not niching down, but really I want to hone in on that curation element as well. Kyle, I know that you're just as much of a business junkie as I am. I love the fact that you launched your podcast. That's so cool to see the work that you're doing there as well. And so along those lines, I love business case studies. And I was recently talking to a very brilliant entrepreneur, and he gave me the example of Spotify versus Pandora. So they both launched at similar times. Pandora decided, well, we've got algorithms and we can figure out based on thumbs ups and thumbs downs what you like better than you probably can. Spotify came along and said, we're just going to let people create playlists. And anyone can find those playlists and anyone can learn from those playlists. And obviously we know who won that battle. And so I want to talk to you about that curation and the social element of it. Tools that I've used to just save my links in the past, they've been great for me. I mean, they've been a little bit archaic and stuck in the Stone Ages, but it seems to me like Stacklist is so dedicated to making that curation findable and making us able to share. Talk to me about the importance of that component in what it is that you're building.
Yeah. So everything in Stacklist is, to get into sort of some of the AI portions of it, everything is vectorized, meaning that it has context of what you save. So you could actually search and say, what we're working towards is that, like, show me the stuff that Brian sent me when we met up in Chicago. Again, the context is not, it may not be specific to the content itself, but the context of who sent it and when they sent it, which I think helps a lot for not having to completely remember everything about the thing that you're trying to find, but more the context around it. And so, but the discovery portion, excuse me, the discovery portion is so key. When I look at the opposite of what doesn't work right now is Yelp. Good example, right? Or even if I do Google Maps, if I go to San Francisco and I pull up something, I'm looking for a restaurant. This actually happened to me about 2 weeks ago. I'm standing on the corner on Market Street, and I haven't been to San Francisco in a while. And I open up Google Maps and I just say restaurants because I'm starving. And what you do is it brings you up about 15 things. Now it's very random. Some are ads. Are those the best ones I want? They just paid more. And then I pinch and zoom, and everything's literally this day, everything was between 4.1 and 4.3 stars. Is that good? Because it feels like in this day and age, if it's below 4.5, you're like, oh, that must just be terrible. And so it's such an arbitrary thing that we've done. And then you have to go into each place and look at comments. Is the sentiment bad? Is it bad because someone said the hostess wasn't nice? There's so much work that we have to do these days to figure out what is good because of other people's versions of curation. Yelp also is a good example. Yelp, I feel like, gets way more into like 2 and 3 stars, which feels like, is it literally burning down right now? And so, but that's not curation in my mind. That's all the algorithms that we've tried to hack. And so when I think about curation and what that means, well, also it's important in the age of AI. Google Gemini is not a tastemaker, right? Google Gemini doesn't know how good the goat cheese balls are at Echo in Atlanta because I've had them, but Google Gemini has not eaten them. So I can tell you should definitely go to Echo in Atlanta and it is like a donut with goat cheese in the middle and honey cracked pepper on top. But that's, again, something that I only know from a context perspective, not because Perplexity or Google Gemini was able to sort of look through a bunch of different stuff and go, I think this one could be good. However, if you had that restaurant in your Stacklist account, and so did I, and so did 83 other people, and the social velocity of that restaurant was really high, people aren't going to put terrible restaurants in their account. So we sort of do away with needing ratings and comparisons and comments as much as being able to see how fast is this thing moving and how many accounts does this send in and how much is it shared. Now I get a much better set of recommendations based on my first and second circle of finding and discovering something versus just looking at an arbitrary list that has ads, a bunch of SEO hacking, and a bunch of comments that I don't know if that's actually true right now or not.
Yeah, Kyle, it's so fun hearing the mind of a product creator and designer like yourself, because you have thought so strategically about all these things. And that's exactly why I love asking people like you this next question, because I'm of the firm belief that great products have an obligation to have great marketing behind them, because you have something that legitimately, I mean, 1 billion people worldwide would benefit from. Anyone who has the internet, more than 1 billion people, because anyone who has the internet, we all have this problem. Every single person has this problem. Anyone with a phone has this problem. So Kyle, this is my challenge to you, that you obviously have the obligation to get it into the hands of as many people as possible. Talk to me from that perspective, because I do know that you obviously have an amazing marketing mind as well. What's that plan look like? Because I've seen firsthand when I look into Stacklist how much cool user-generated content is out there, UGC content. We hear people talk about that all the time. So at a point, it sells itself, it markets itself the more we all start using it. But where's your head at in that regard?
I think right now we're really focused on just making it first useful at its core. So there's a couple of levels to it. One, if it's just super easy for you to save things and find those things again, that is step one. So we're making the Stacklist ecosystem. I mean, normally I would think there's probably some recommendations. Don't go build a bunch of apps, just make the platform and make it good. We immediately went into Chrome, Firefox, Edge. Safari comes out next week. And then we went into iOS, Android, and we're working on Mac and PC. But the idea is wherever you are, if you're going to really be the operating system for links in someone's life, then you got to be wherever they are. So if you're walking down the street, or if you're working on your laptop, your iPad, or whatever, and you want to recall that thing, making it really, really easy to get something in and get something out. So that utility is also very different. When you think about building a social network, something like a Facebook or an Instagram doesn't have really that utility that you're like, I cannot live without this. Sometimes you abandon it. You're like, I'm deleting Instagram forever. I scroll too much. But that's usually just because you want that sort of social interaction piece, but it doesn't really have that utility of running or curating your life and all the things in it. So by having that utility, that's the core. Then you start to sort of go concentric circles out from there. The utility for you and me is you and I sit down and we catch up. And then as we're talking, you're like, oh my gosh, you've just told me so many things. I'm never going to remember these things. This happened to me once when I was in LA. Someone said, I'm never going to remember all this stuff. And I was like, don't worry about it. I'll send you a stack. And as I left the bar, walking back to my hotel, in that period of time, I made a stack and texted it. It was like, so good to see you. Here's the 4 things that we talked about. And I just get back this like head blown emoji that was like, hey, here's those things we talked about. And again, you don't have to have a bunch of random links. You can just hit save, 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 and it all goes into your Stacklist account. And so that you then becomes social utility for all of us. And then that third concentric circle is discovery. Now imagine you and me and let's say 100 of our connections. If I'm going to Italy and I've never been to Rome, let's say, and I start to do trip planning, I bet between 100 of us and the people we know within a 2 degrees of separation, that I would get some pretty good recommendations with notes and context about what I want to go do and see in Rome. So now I just hit save, 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 save. And I don't have to sort of spend an hour and a half like I normally do, I guess, making a Notion document or a Google Doc or like putting it in Mac Notes, which makes it still kind of hard to collaborate with. Like, to my wife, hey, Bonnie, I made you a Notion. And she's like, I don't really use that every day. Do I have to sign up? And so there's this sort of like barrier. But this makes it super easy for us to collaborate on something like a stack. And then once we finish the trip, I just click a button and it shows up on my personal profile. And then I can say on Instagram, hey, check out this stack. And here's all the places we went. And so it's sort of like cuts across all those lines of personal utility, then social discovery. And that's why I don't want to niche down, because I think there's something interesting here in not making an app just for travel or for restaurants or for real estate or for pro gaming, but really finding something that sort of sits on top of everything, like a browser or email, I guess.
Yeah, I love that. But Kyle, shots fired. You called me out right there for all my love, my deep love for Notion documents, for literally everything. And you're absolutely correct. Sharing it with anyone who's not entrepreneurial is just like, what is this Notion.so link? And what am I supposed to do with it?
Or keeping it up. How much time do you spend weekly or monthly keeping your Notion so perfect that your brain doesn't break? Because I love Notion, and I was a huge Evernote user forever.
Same.
The problem is my tags would get out of order, and I think I had like 800 tags because I wasn't using them all. And then the pages and the nesting and the database, is it up to date? And I sort of and so all of a sudden there's this mental overhead where you're spending almost more time organizing than you are actually getting the use out of being able to sort of create and share externally. And that's where we want to make it, dump everything. We're working on import features where you can export all of your Google Maps places. I know I have 839 stars in the world on Google Maps. So to export all those and then just dump them straight into Stacklist. Now, when I say show me my places in France, then they pull up and I've got the trip planning ready.
Yeah, I love that. That's so cool. And yeah, you're absolutely correct. I mean, that's the reason why I have to use Zapier to do a lot of the things that I want to do in Notion. I'm introducing all of these different tools from so many different places, Kyle. So I love how much you think of Stacklist as a solution there. But I want to call out those concentric circles, because as you were telling the stories of real life use cases, even your own stories, I kept thinking, Kyle, you've embedded this into your life. It's so easy to organize your life this way. And it also trickles into your social relationships and your friendships and the way you travel and all of that. So I really love that perspective and that attitude towards thinking big, not only in your own life, but entrepreneurially, you clearly think big. So I do want to switch gears and ask you this question, entrepreneur to entrepreneur, not as the founder of Stacklist, but I want to ask you about filtering ideas, because you clearly have no shortage of ideas, Kyle. How do you decide? And it's easy for all of us to pursue all of the ideas. How do you personally decide which ideas to pursue and which ones to just kind of sideline or filter out completely?
I think there are a few strategic things that we focused on. I think from an apps perspective, we started using technologies like Chromium and Flutter to be able to get iOS and Android out fast, and then also to be able to get Edge and Firefox and Chrome out fast. And then we pivoted to profiles. And the reason we pivoted to profiles was, I've seen content creators. If we think about curation, content creators are the ultimate curators. They're the ones that sort of have that. If you're a photographer, you know what it's like when you switch that lens on and you start seeing the world through your lens. You're like, oh, that's good. I should shoot that, and I should do that, and this is an angle I want. Well, content creators and influencers are those people who see the world. I should save this. I should shoot that. I should put that somewhere. And so I wanted to pressure test Stacklist with the people who do curation for a living. And they're going to be the hardest ones to please, right? So if I can't save a restaurant on the go in a couple of seconds, or if I can't sort of make a stack of, when I'm planning to go to Chicago, if it takes me too long. So I'm really, we focused on profiles and then really working with content creators first to really pressure test the system. Because honestly, day-to-day users of, let's say, someone who might save a recipe once a week or twice a week is not the user who's really going to give me a lot of pushback or a lot of feedback on whether this works or not. But an influencer that has 250,000 followers, shout out to Ellie, who's amazing. One of our partners who is an expat in Copenhagen that uses Stacklist like crazy. It has given us the best feedback because all she's doing all day long is thinking about both for her family and travel and planning how to get things in and then how to share them really quickly. That's where we put a lot of our focus.
Yeah, Kyle, you brought this up, so I'm going to go there with you. You bring up photography, and I know, obviously, as an omnipotentialite, that you have so many different interests. I love that term that you introduced me to. And so I find that the deeper I go into anything, whether it's chess or tennis or riding my bike through cities or anything, all of it is just a microcosm of life, and business fits that term as well. And so along those lines, I learned so much more about business through going deeper into these other things. You've got a lot to pick from, Kyle, so I'm going to keep it super broad for you. Give us something that has changed your perspective on business and or life through the lenses of these different realms that you've played in, whether it's photography, video, movie, improv. I'd love to hear some of those insights.
I think from an entrepreneurial perspective, I'm the most grateful to be a omnipotential neurodivergent. Back to being a sniper and a detective and an inventor and all the things, because it's actually given me the ability to, I've started shooting a lot of video when I go on trips now, for Stacklist, being able to sort of shoot and edit. And I've done editing before and audio. And then I worked at an enterprise social media company, Sprinkler, early on when there was only 120 people there, but being in and around social and partnerships. And then also, fun fact, in another life, I worked at a startup where I worked with Kevin Jonas, and we did a live streamed game show on your phone. And I was running and producing the camera as well as working with him to write his dialogue and jokes. And so like those, I talk about the different lives, but you start to put those together when I stand up Stacklist. I'm sure that from my father's perspective and his generation of sort of thinking about like joining a company and being there for, until you retire and getting the sort of 40-year ring or whatever it is, it seems like I'm just kind of bouncing around and I don't know but what's funny is that you then start to use all those things in so many different places. And then it culminates in the ability to have deep, meaningful conversations with experienced designers and developers and video editors and animators and social media strategists. And from a business perspective, when I'm talking to a VC and we talk about why we should focus on X, Y, or Z, I can tell you how something should be built and how long it's going to take because I've actually been in coding boot camps. And so being able to sort of go broad and deep enough, has partly been empathetic. I try and be empathetic for everyone that I interact with, that I know sort of, what they need to do and what strings and what goals they have, but also knowing how long things takes and the sizing of things and what moves the needle, kind of came from, doing all those different things.
Yeah, I love that perspective. And you're absolutely correct. It is confusing for older generations. I remember when I started my soccer blog and then a marketing agency and I got into SEO, my parents hated that one question, Kyle, when their friends would ask them.
Just pick one.
Yeah. And my parents' friends would always ask, what does your son do? And they struggled so much with answering that question. So,
well, you mean this week?
Yeah, exactly. I love it, Kyle. Honestly, this is the real stuff. It's so much fun having you on because you do think in so many different ways and apply it to what you're building, and you're building something incredible. So I always love asking this question at the end of every single episode. And I'm going to plug because I know that listeners are thinking, Brian, I want you to do this for 4 hours with Kyle. Well, the good news is, as I mentioned, you have your own podcast. We're going to drop those links in just a second. But before we get there, my final question is, what's your one best piece of advice? The one takeaway, knowing that we're being listened to by entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs all over the world at all different stages of their own personal growth journeys. What's that one thing that you want to impart on them today?
There are no rules. Be very, very aware of the matrix. I think sometimes when you're in a career path or you're going down one path, everything on that path sort of leads you to the next step just on that path. And even when you get advice, my dog Millie is trying to participate.
Kyle, it's because there's no rules.
Because there's no rules. Yeah. And she says, I agree. But it's even when you start fundraising, everyone says, oh, you got to do this and you got to do that. And the deck should only be like this and you should only do this way. And you've got to make it sort of approachable enough, especially as a first time founder, that you should put it this way. But it also has to be tangible and something that sort of de-risked, but it also needs to be massive and huge. And you sort of get conflicting advice all over the place. And I think more than anything, trying to make enough space to listen to yourself and take in all the advice you get, and then just make a decision and go. There's no wrong answers. And even if you go down a path and it doesn't really work out in a certain instance, just do little incremental pivots and just keep listening to yourself. And for me, it's one of those things that I've never really had a moment. I've never had a moment where I've thought, oh, I should just pivot, or I should just stop this and I should do something else, or whatever it is. I just feel it in my bones that this is where I need to be headed. And so when I get advice, no, you have to do this, or you have to niche down on this one, you have to do X, Y, and Z. I take that advice and I take it seriously, but I also digest it. And then I put it through my own filter to sort of say, but that's not the mission and the vision that we're driving towards. So, no rules, and just listen to your inner voice.
Yeah, I love that advice, Kyle. I'm so appreciative for you bringing that advice to our audience. It also is full circle because I teased this episode as one where for all of our journeys, one thing leads to another. And you've showcased that not only in the advice that you've given, but in the way that you think, in the way that you evolve and continue to grow as an entrepreneur, as a person, but especially with Stacklist, which I'm so excited to not only follow your growth, but I'm excited to be a user of yours. And it's rare that I tell listeners to check out your website, not only from a business perspective, not only to learn about the things that you're doing, but also to become fellow users as well. So Kyle, drop those links on us. Where should listeners go from here?
Yeah, go to stacklist.app and sign up for free. Try it. You can get all the apps in there. We have chat. Our team is always around. If you've got questions, go to stacklist.app/Kyle. You can also see all of my things. You can see all of my New York restaurants and my Venice trip, as well as what I use, the gear I use to stream for videos, etc. There's also a link on there to put time in my calendar. If you're starting to use Stacklist, you've got questions, you've got ideas, just throw time on my calendar anytime. I love it. So we'll brainstorm and I love all the feedback because I want to make it better. And our team is amazing. We get feedback, and there's a high likelihood when you give us feedback that it will be fixed the next week.
Yes, I love that, Kyle. That is such a generous offer for all of our listeners worldwide. Just go straight to stacklist.app. You'll find that link and more down below in the show notes, no matter where it is that you're tuning into today's episode. We're also linking to Kyle's podcast if you want to check out all the brilliant conversations that he has with fellow founders as well. Like I said, Kyle loves business just as much as all of us do here. So definitely go check out his podcast as well. We're also linking to his personal LinkedIn. So if you just want to continue the conversation, don't be shy. There's lots of goodies down below in the show notes. So Kyle, on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Yeah, and I'd actually like to throw one thing in there. I'm going to actually set up a code for your listeners. So Wantrepreneur, use that code when you sign up, and it'll be 50% off for life. So
that's massive, Kyle.
That'll really help everybody get in and sort of use the premium features, try it out, use the AI search and make your own profile, QR codes, all the things so you can try everything.
Yes, I so appreciate that. Well, now I doubly owe you a thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, good. Thanks so much for having me.